Constantine is arguably one of the most famous emperors of the early Christian church. But who was he? What did he do? This video will give you an insight into Constantine's impact upon the Christian church. Constantine was born in the city of Nisus on the 27th of February, 272 AD. His mother Helena was a Christian before he was born, and although Constantine's father Flavius Constantius was not one, he tolerated them. Emperor Diocletian ruled the Roman Empire when Constantine was born. However, as his empire expanded, he soon realized that it had become far too large for one man to oversee. Therefore, in the year 286, he divided his empire in two and allowed his trusted army officer and friend Maximian to take responsibility for military defense in the western part of the empire, while he remained in the east. However, dividing the empire in two was not enough. By 293 AD, Diocletian introduced subordinate divisions within each empire. Both Diocletian and Maximian were referred to as Augusti, which meant they were not only in charge of the military efforts in their localized areas, but also claimed the authority that came with being an emperor. They appointed two Caesars for the new subdivisions in their areas: Galerius in the east, under Diocletian, and Constantius in the west, under Maximinus. Succession in the Roman Empire was always hereditary, and Galerius and Constantius were adopted by the emperors as their sons, who would succeed them if they were to resign or die. Constantine was Constantius's candidate for imperial succession. At this time, Christians were treated with contempt as they refused to join their fellow citizens in what were considered necessary acts of worship. Non-Christians saw professed Christians as atheists and looked upon them with suspicion. Although Diocletian disapproved of religious nonconformity, he did not make any moves against Christians until the autumn of 302, on a visit to Antioch. It was at this time that Romanus, a Christian deacon from Caesarea Palestine, travelled to Antioch. When he arrived, he was shocked to see pagan temples overflowing with men, women, and children. As a faithful follower of Christ, this scene distressed him greatly, and he decided to protest. Romanus made his way into the court, just as the customary pagan sacrifices were taking place, and with a loud voice he interrupted and denounced the pagan sacrificial practices. This enraged Diocletian, who sent him to have his tongue cut off before being imprisoned only to be executed a year later. This began the Great Persecution, which lasted from 302 to 313 AD. Barbarians, apostates, atheists! These were some of the names given to Christians. Although to many they deserved punishment because of their departure from the ancestral religion. In February 303, Diocletian issued an edict that prevented Christians not only from openly worshipping their God, but from assembling in churches or private places for worship. This intense persecution continued across the empire for the next 10 years, although it varied in intensity, in time and place. Constantine grew up in a world surrounded by persecution. His father Constantius died in 306 AD during a time of political chaos, and his son Constantine took his position. He was 35 to 36 years old at this stage, and despite not being a Christian, he immediately decreed for the persecution of Christians in his domain to end. However, the persecution continued elsewhere. Constantine was preparing for battle against Maximinus, who had 100,000 men, while Constantine had only 40,000. The odds were against him. While on his way to Rome, he saw a cross of light in the sky with the words, "Conquer by this." That same night he had a dream where he was directed to put that same sign he saw in the heavens on the shields of his soldiers before proceeding to battle. After consulting other Christians in his entourage, he concluded that this indeed was a sign from God, and ordered his armies to put the symbol on their shields. Constantine and his army won the Battle of Milvian Bridge, and many consider this battle as the defining point in his conversion experience. Although Constantine already publicly declared himself as a Christian before the battle, it is possible that he had a heart conversion during the battle. After this victory, Constantine considered himself to be God's emperor, who was entrusted with the divine mission to protect Christianity. His army was officially declared Christian, and he gave his Christian soldiers leave to attend church on Sunday. By the end of the year 313, 10 years of intensive persecution had rapidly reduced the number of Christians in the empire. Despite the threats of imprisonment or death, they persisted with their beliefs. The other Roman emperor, Licinius, married Constantine's half-sister in 313 AD. After the wedding celebrations had come to an end, they turned their attention to imperial affairs. Constantine wanted not only the toleration of Christians in the empire, but also the return of whatever had been confiscated from them, as well as legal protection for Christians. Licinius cooperated, albeit unenthusiastically, and together they co-authored the Edict of Milan. Amongst other things, this edict declared that Christians should have liberty to follow that mode of religion which to each of them appeared best. All who choose this religion are to be permitted, freely and absolutely, to remain in it, and not to be disturbed any ways or molested. This edict officially ended the Great Persecution and served as the official religious policy for the next decade. Because of Constantine's prestige and popularity, a group of disaffected Christians in North Africa called Donatists appealed to him to settle a dispute with local church leaders. Constantine considered this disunity a danger to the safety of the empire and his rule. Since God had given Constantine great power on earth, he also had great responsibility, and he intended to use it for good. Constantine got professional advice about regular church practice and called a council in Arles, Gaul, to judge the Donatists' case. The council quickly condemned the Donatists and also decided that the Bishop of Rome should decide on the date of Easter each year. He agreed, of course. Constantine was pleased with the result, but the Donatists remained defiant. When Licinius began oppressing Christians in the east, tensions between the two co-emperors began to simmer. A border dispute sparked off a war between the two, and Constantine, fighting under his Cairo banner, totally crushed Licinius and became the sole emperor of Rome. Following the precedent of previous emperors, Constantine thanked his powerful new god for granting him total victory in his wars by rewarding God's priests, the Christian bishops. In the year 324 AD, the new Christian emperor set up a new Christian capital for his new Christian Rome. This city could serve as a hub for Christian thinkers to study and teach without being molested, and being away from old pagan Rome would prevent unnecessary conflict. Keeping God happy would guarantee safety and peace for the empire, but had Constantine done enough? Constantine, having little knowledge of his new religion, summoned the Christian scholar Lactantius to teach the Christian religion to his children, and perhaps himself. When Constantine's rashness led to family tragedy, Hosius, the Bishop of Cordova, comforted him. Hosius assured Constantine that Jesus could forgive any sin and became Constantine's Christian advisor, guiding the emperor in his growing understanding of the faith and influencing many of his decisions. Christians in the East were now under Constantine's benevolent eye, but all was not well in the church in these new eastern territories. Hundreds of Christians in Egypt took to the streets chanting the slogan of Arius, "There was when he was not! There was when he was not!" This local dispute had become a threat to the unity of the church and of the empire itself. Constantine called a council in Nicaea of bishops throughout the entire empire. The issue was debated, and the result was the Nicene Creed, still used by many Christians to this day. Apparently, Constantine himself suggested the key word of this creed, homoousios, of one substance, but he probably had help with that from his advisor, Bishop Hosius. Arianism, the teaching of Arius that there was a time when Jesus Christ did not exist, lost the debate by a huge majority. The bishops who voted in favour of Arianism were exiled, and Constantine, flushed by his great victory, hoped that unity had been preserved. Unfortunately, the Council of Nicaea was followed by a whole series of smaller meetings where Constantine alternately favoured Arius and his enemy Athanasius, and whoever else was close to him. The confusion this created kept the controversy going for generations. Constantine held a celebration of his long and glorious reign, inviting Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea to be the main speaker. Eusebius prepared thoroughly for this great honour and would later use his research and conversations with the emperor to write a biography of Constantine's life that remains to this day. Constantine was presented as hero not only of the empire but the church as well. Eusebius called him an example of true godliness to the human race. This emphasis on the value of a Christian emperor set a precedent for later emperors to follow or reject. Christians had begun to be associated with the Roman emperors. For many Romans, becoming a Christian was a good step to a better life. Christian leaders were given great powers for good, and Sunday, being associated with Christianity, was made a holiday. Jews, on the other hand, were despised, and their seventh-day Sabbath with them. Outside the Roman Empire, Christianity did not have government favours. Rather, their love for Constantine made them suspected of disloyalty by the authorities. Constantine wanted to do for the Christians outside the empire what he had done for those within, and prepared to invade Persia. On the way there, however, he fell ill, and soon realised he would not recover. At that time, many believed that baptism literally washed away all a person's sins, but it was a once-only, exclusive offer. It was not unusual, therefore, for professional sinners like soldiers and politicians to put baptism off as long as possible. Constantine was both soldier and politician, so now he hurried back to Constantinople to be baptized before it was too late. In a villa outside Nicomedia, he realized he could not go on. The nearest bishop was called for, Bishop Eusebius of Nicomedia. He was an Arian, but it was too late to find anyone else. Thus, an Arian baptized the first Christian emperor. Constantine died on the day of Pentecost in the year 337, the 31st year of his reign, his brow still moist with the waters of baptism. Constantine's sons had already been rigorously prepared for imperial power. Following their father's policies, they favoured the church at the expense of pagans. The Arian bishops were much more diplomatic than their mainstream counterparts, especially the anti-Arian Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria. Constantine's kind treatment of Arians became favouritism in his sons. They lost patience with Athanasius and banished him from the empire. Constantine's system of succession led to Julian the Apostate coming to power when Constantine's own sons died. Julian seemed to be a Christian, but once he got power he became openly pagan and hoped to wipe Christianity off the face of the earth. As a part of his plan, he exiled Christian bishops and brought exiled bishops back, hoping to cause chaos. This resulted in Athanasius returning to Alexandria and gaining advantage over the Arians. Soon, Julian died in battle, and Theodosius came to power. This new Christian emperor reacted to Julian's persecution, establishing Christianity as Rome's official religion and beginning a process of government persecution of paganism. The trend that Constantine had begun had become the status quo of the empire. Christianity would help the state to rule, and the head of state would protect and unify Christianity. Ultimately, this union of church and state would be poisonous to both, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Constantine came to power in the midst of civil war and brought some stability to the empire. He gave Christians a taste for freedom, but also state favoritism. He also took an active role in church affairs and shifted the balance of power in the church in favor of the hierarchy, and especially the Bishop of Rome. All this brought about Christianity's transformation from a despised sect to the universal established religion of the Western world.